All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Bobby Jo Greger, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Formstack. And I'm excited to be hosting and moderating today's panel on the state of digital maturity, advancing workflow automation. Before we get started, I just wanted to dive in a little bit and tell you guys a little bit of some background on Formstack. For over 15 years, we've helped more than 25,000 organizations reimagine their world of work with our no-code workplace productivity platform. Customers all over the world use our digital forms, document automation, and e-signature solutions to do everything from streamlining the patient intake process to automating marketing and sales workflows. So that's who we are. That's Formstack. For our event today, I'm so glad you guys are here. I'm really excited to talk about the state of digital maturity and how teams are using digitization to create positive change at their orgs. We'll start with an overview of the findings from our State of Digital Maturity report. Then we're going to kick off the panel discussion with our awesome guests and end with a Q&A session. Maybe we'll get Tom to talk a little bit about Top Gun. No pressure, Tom. Please drop your questions in the Q&A tab you see on the right-hand side of your screen. Not only are you able to add your questions, but you can upvote others with the thumbs up button to push it to the top of the list to be answered at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into the report. As we all know, as you may know, as I hope you would know, the last couple of years have been a challenging time for businesses. With the onset of the pandemic, organizations were forced into a contactless world that required them to accelerate their digitization efforts. But we wondered here at Formstack, after 2 years of constant reacting and adapting, just how much have organizations progressed in their digital maturity? How far have we actually come along? So this question for us led to a creation of our State of Digital Maturity report. With the help of the amazing Mantis research, we surveyed 2,000 US knowledge workers to learn how organizations are digitizing processes, automating workflows, and improving efficiencies. Since digital maturity is more critical than ever, we wanted to see how well organizations were staying up to date and, meeting the expectations of their employees and customers. So to help analyze the answers we received, we created a digital maturity model. Now, this model uses 4 pillars to measure orgs against the ideal of optimal digital maturity. These pillars include the first one, culture. To get a sense of an org's culture, we ask questions about management, innovation, and adaptability. The second is workflow digitization. To better understand their successes and struggles, we ask questions around the use of paper forms and documents, reasons for digitizing processes, and involvement in workflow automation. The third, technology. To better understand the role of technology plays with orgs, we ask questions about tech stack, no-code tools, tech purchase drivers, and tech audits. And then finally, team alignment. We ask questions about building workflows, sharing learnings, and communicating across departments. By asking these questions, we were then able to identify how digitally mature our respondents were. The 4 stages of digital maturity are limited. These orgs are stuck in the status quo and still use manual paper-based processes. The second is invested. These orgs are motivated to improve and have digitized at least half their forms and documents. Then we have refined. These orgs prioritize digitization and use workflow automation to refine their processes. And then final is optimized. These orgs have completely digitized their processes and are looking for new ways to optimize their workflow. So as you're looking at these 4 stages of maturity, I'm sure for you, you're kind of figuring out and identifying, okay, where do I land here? Do I, sit in limited? Do I sit in the refined? Maybe I'm in an optimized org. We're going to go ahead and launch a poll right now to you guys and ask you that question right now. What stage of digital maturity are you at today? All right, we're getting the numbers in. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to ask this, bring the results back up later when we get our panel here. But we're going to continue on and find out, what did we find out with these findings? What did we learn here at Formstack by doing this survey? We're going to go ahead and share that with you now. So Many organizations are still struggling. Only 4% of orgs we surveyed have reached the ideal of a fully automated and digitized workplace. And 51% of workers report that they are still spending at least 2 hours per day on repetitive tasks. We also noticed some interesting trends based on industry, with financial services and software being the most optimized. And then we've got healthcare and education showing the most struggle in their digitization efforts. So we will see that organizations are still facing challenges, but we know that digital maturity is a must in today's world. So how should companies go about achieving success? After taking a look at the responses of digital mature organizations, we noticed the following tactics. The foundation that sets digitally mature organizations apart from all others is a culture that welcomes change. We love change, don't we? Some more than others. But over time, what these orgs have learned is how to thrive by focusing on innovation, iteration, and disruption. For example, 83% of respondents that work at a digitally mature org said they feel encouraged to continually learn and test ideas, while only 27% of respondents from limited orgs felt like they had the power to innovate. If you want your own company to move up the digital maturity scale, there needs to be a corporate mindset shift. To reach optimal digital maturity, your organization must embrace change and create a culture that empowers employees to innovate and move beyond the way things have always been done. Data and technology must be welcomed as key ways to identify and improve processes on your way to advancement. The other thing that we noticed in these tactics was that optimized organizations also prioritize the elimination of paper. So they get rid of paper. Of the respondents we surveyed, 73% said that they have digitized all forms of documents, whereas limited orgs still have over half of their process based on paper. Ugh. Yeah, digital transformation efforts can only flourish if everyone in an org understands the benefits of digitization. When this happens, it's easier to get buy-in from all stakeholders to eliminate paper. However, adopting an initiative to reduce paper is just the beginning. To truly move forward with your org's digital transformation efforts, you must work towards widespread digitization. Auditing your processes can help you find and fix places where paper forms, documents, and signatures are still slowing things down, and streamlining workflows can help you reap important benefits that go beyond increased efficiency, like better security, more accurate data, and enhanced experiences for your employees and customers, and get to save the trees. So as we know, customer expectations are shifting to digital, and optimized organizations make it a priority to adapt. This focus on delivering better digital customer experiences gives them a competitive advantage against their less digitally mature peers. In optimized orgs, 80% of respondents said they don't find it very challenging to meet customer expectations. But in limited orgs, 30% of respondents find it difficult to meet customer needs. The lesson here, if you want to stay competitive, your organization must also keep up with customer expectations. This requires understanding customer preferences and actively using this data to improve the customer experience. Once you've identified opportunities for improvement, it's important to track and analyze feedback to ensure your digitization efforts are working. So repetitive, mindless tasks and busy work make employees feel stressed, unfulfilled, and overwhelmed. Optimized organizations focus on removing these inefficiencies through workflow automation, which produces better employee experiences and improves retention. As we can see in the chart, employees in limited orgs are less excited about their job, don't have enough time to get their work done, and feel like they can't take time off with it without getting backlogged. Whereas employees at optimized orgs are struggling less and experiencing higher morale. You can improve the employee experience at your own organization by devoting time to tracking inefficiencies, improving your workflows, and eliminating paper. If these efforts aren't prioritized, the employee experience will suffer and retention rates will likely fall. The most successful organizations use technology to remove repetitive tasks and inefficiencies, which helps employees become more productive and satisfied with their jobs. However, Advancing digital maturity can only happen if teams are provided enough resources. Optimized organizations consistently audit their tools and processes to remove roadblocks. This ensures resources like people, time, and money are used effectively. For example, 61% of respondents we surveyed said they rarely or never have projects delayed due to a lack of technical resources, versus 62% of limited orgs often or sometimes are experiencing delays. Of course, providing your team with enough technical resources isn't just about headcount, number of tools, or budget. If your IT team is bogged down with inefficient systems, adding more tools or people won't fix the root of the problem or the issue. Auditing your tech stack can help you pinpoint roadblocks like which tools take the most time for IT to maintain. You can then identify solutions that allow IT workers to better allocate their time instead of, resetting passwords over and over and over again. And to further move the needle, your organization must be open to exploring new tools and making the approval process easy. So, optimized organizations don't just buy technology when a problem arises. Their strategy is to invest in tech now that can help them solve issues in the future. As hiring technical workers becomes more challenging due to cost and scarcity, digital mature organizations have already found one solution: providing employees with no-code tools. 84% of our respondents from digitally mature orgs said they provide employees with no-code tools to automate processes, whereas 43% of limited orgs report they rarely change tools or add to their tech stack. If your organization is still purchasing technology to fix issues as they arise, it may be time to shift to a more forward-thinking mindset. Selecting technology that has the potential to address many issues over time enables processes to adapt as business needs change. Adopting these type of philosophy on technology requires being open to change and comfortable with an evolving tech stack. So once you're there, your organization is more likely to adopt new tools like no-code software that can help you overcome new workplace challenges. So there's really no doubt about it, you guys. The future of work is digital. But what do our experts have to say about that? So I want to go ahead and welcome our panelists here today with us. We've got Peter and Tom and Alexis. So Tom, let's start actually with Peter. Peter, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves to everybody here?
Hi, my name is Peter Coffey. I'm Vice President for Strategic Research at Salesforce. Been with Salesforce for 15 years, which means that I joined a 2,000-person company that was only then trying to get people accustomed to the idea that you might get your enterprise applications in the form of a subscription rather than a CD that you would install on your own server in your own closet. It caught on. We're now roughly 35 times the size of the company that I joined. And really, the conversation speaks to the themes of today, which is that we are not talking about a better tool. We are talking about a digital transformation orientation that is genuinely centered on the customer and not merely aimed at the customer. And we absolutely have been doing our own research and with partners and others to another theme that's just been discussed, which is that investing in the employee experience makes it plausible that you'll wind up with a better customer experience, but trying to create a better customer experience, then telling the employees, okay, step up, deliver this, is roughly on the same level as the galley slaves crew that were told the captain wanted to go water skiing that afternoon. It's not well received. And today, people will not tolerate having the burden of delivering customer experience inflicted on them when they are not being given the tools and culture that make them feel empowered to do that and to take pride in doing it well.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I'm so excited that you're here with us. I can't wait for you to share even more of your awesome wisdom and learnings with the rest of the group here today.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tom.
Hey, Tom Hoffman. I'm a practice lead at Crowe, and we're a large accounting firm. And like a lot of large accounting firms, we also have a wider consulting footprint that crosses a lot of different technologies. Myself and my team, we focus on Salesforce specifically. And before I got into the consulting world, I worked at a foundation inside of a large integrated payer provider in the healthcare space. And it was really interesting. I had a team of 3 people and like 2 interns, and we had to solve some really big problems. Like, how do I get 60 healthcare professionals and a couple $1 million worth of cargo down to Honduras to perform 70 surgeries in a week?
Oh,
Or
wow.
how do we organize these large educational conferences that are multi-day and offering CPE in partnership with local universities and things like that? And when you have 3 full-time staff, the only way to do that is through technology.
Yeah.
And so even back then, it was when we were, I think 2010, we adopted Salesforce and started this whole process of digital transformation, even at a small scale. And out of that, it obviously born my career in consulting. And I think, to echo what Peter was saying, what I've really been seeing is we've transitioned from this point solution, I have a problem and I buy a tool, to looking at processes as having processes through experience instead. And experience is having a start and an end point and several touch points in between. And how do we deliver these connected experiences with technology and automation versus focusing on these little moments in between? And so I think that's the major shift that we're seeing, is just looking at things from an experience longitudinally versus as individual touch points.
Yeah, that's so good, Tom. I'm excited for the rest of the group to hear more about your just experience and exposure to just the different people you've worked with as well. So that's awesome. Alexis.
Hi, so my name is Alexi. I'm the Vice President of IT Infrastructure and Operations at Banner Health. Banner Health is one of the largest healthcare delivery organizations in the Southwest, with around 30 facilities operating in 6 states, with somewhere north of 50,000 employees. A lot of our efforts over the last several years around creating not only consumer, employee, patient, member experiences, a lot of that has to do with process management, process automation, and it's been a huge investment of time and effort across not only the IT organization, but also our process engineering teams over the last several years, to really ensure that we're optimizing our experiences, not only for our employees, members, but also patients and customers. So
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, so glad to have you here too. So I wanted to get us started off with just the poll results that we asked the group here. I'm going to go ahead and share those now with you guys. When you're looking at this digital maturity scale and just how people kind of self-assess kind of where they're at right now, before we dove into the results, does anything here, stand out to any of you? Anything kind of like, man, like I didn't anticipate this, or, anything here that just you want to speak to?
The first thing that the poll inspired in me is the thought that if you're capable of answering the question with any precision, then you must already be in a pretty advanced state. And the people who have said, oh yeah, we're optimized, well, the places where they're not digital are almost literally invisible to them.
Yeah.
And so it is easy to overestimate 2 things. One, it's easy to overestimate your overall level of digitization, and it's easy to underestimate the paralyzing effect that a couple of key gaps or frictions in your system could be having. And you might think you're 90% of the way. Yeah, but the last 10% is costing you maybe half of the potential, or maybe even 2/3 of the potential productivity gains.
Yeah.
So it's tremendously important to be careful what you measure, because an accurate measurement of the wrong thing can definitely lead you to misestimate where you are and what your priorities need to be. And I'm getting some body language from Tom that suggests that he resonates with this idea that the last 10% might be 80% of the problem.
I think it's interesting when you say, the idea of being optimized. It's like asking someone if you're self-actualized. And,
right in there, yeah.
I mean, and so saying yes is really, I think, when you think about automation and digitization as a continuing journey, to be fully optimized is sort of probably impossible to really accomplish. But I think the invested group is interesting, because I think what we're seeing with our client base is that over the last 7 years, there's been a heavy investment in technology and solutions, and recognizing the value in automation and all the efficiency gains. but it's been a lot of, again, point solutions. It's been a lot of, oh, this product will solve this problem, this product will solve this problem. And there hasn't been a really sort of strategic look. And that's where we're doing a lot of work today, is people are saying, well, we need to integrate all of these things. We should be communicating end to end in our automation versus having this collection of tools that are disconnected and we have automation in silos. And so I think that invested group feels probably small, but also it's right in that it's the biggest, because I think that's what we're seeing across our client base is lots of tools, lots of solutions, but none of them really tell a complete story end to end yet.
Optimization and automation can both be almost dangerous goals, because going into pandemic, we had a lot of people with highly optimized systems. The problem is they were optimized for a non-pandemic environment, and they turned out to be quite brittle and fragile in the face of a need to change locations of work, change supplier relationships, and so on. Optimization and automation and resilience are not things that you can easily achieve simultaneously, and putting a higher priority on resilience has been effective. It's interesting that, Alexi, you used that wonderful phrase, healthcare delivery. I'm not sure that we called it that 10 years ago. I think back then we called it, medical services or medical practice or whatever. You came to the care. The idea that healthcare delivery is now an experience to be provided instead of procedures and medications to be administered is I think, one of the best examples of the change in focus.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think if you think of again, not to go too much into the healthcare side where, you see that transition from pay for fee for service, into more of a pay for outcome type of model. But I agree that I think things like optimized, right? It's all in the context of the environment and the circumstances that you're currently in today, and similar to like peeling back layers of onions as well. If what you're able to see, or again, you're kind of limited or obstructed around where maybe some of these opportunities exist. So I think this is really interesting to see the survey, but I think it maybe aligns with where people are contextually at with this particular type of work.
That's great. Alicia, is there anything else that stands out to you about this scale here?
I really agreed with the commentary from the other panelists, and again, I really like the optimized commentary from Peter, and that again, it's so contextual when you say you're optimized. That's in the context of like I said, the market that you're operating in, and and as well as what you have access to see and view. So I think I think you have to be very cautious, because it seems like this is again a sliding scale where you're probably moving back and forth between optimized, invested, and refined, and even unsure depending on what it is you're actually looking at and what you have access into view.
Yeah,
Bobby Joe, there's almost no counterexample to changes that are happening in plain sight. I don't need to make predictions about demographic change. They're a certainty. If I know how many 20-year-olds I have now, I know I have a really good handle on how many 40-year-olds I will have in 20 years. It's not really a prediction. The amount of connective capacity in the planet, that's another example of that. If you've optimized for demographics or levels of connectivity or scarcities of computation and data, then you have built the perfect system to do what you were doing 10 years ago.
Yeah. Just by listening to what you guys are saying, it reminds me of part of the study where it talks about how it's important to have a very good change mindset, and that resilience and adaptability has to be something that's a part of your organization if you want to be optimized. Would you guys agree with that assessment?
But I think it's more of a recognition, though, that you're never optimized in a lot of ways as well. I think that's a false sense. You can generate a false sense of comfort around, okay, we fully optimized. I think organizations like ours thought that we were optimized from a laboratory testing perspective, and then in our ability to administer vaccines and things like that, and then COVID hit. So I just think that's maybe, like, again, you can lull yourself to sleep if you kind of think of your organization as being fully optimized.
The other framework that I've sometimes found useful to introduce is, if you've digitized all your nouns, but you haven't yet digitized your verbs, then you haven't really gotten it done. And if you eliminate all your paper and all your paper are now forms on a screen instead of forms on dead tree, you can say, wow, we're now 100% digital. And yet the form that goes to someone's inbox and sits there for a day or a week because that person was out of office, when any of 5 other people could probably also have filled in a space or initialed something as acceptable to proceed. Digitizing the process is not enough. Digitizing the process is much more than digitizing the content of the process.
Yeah.
Digitizing the content enables digitization of process, but you better finish the job.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I love that. Tom, did you have any thoughts on that?
In your question, I think you mentioned managing our openness to change, and I think that's part of the when you think of people who are on the lower end of that scale in a poll, or when they feel like they're limited or invested, I think there's a lot of organizational sort of stagnation that happens. There's a lot of, and I think in the report it covers it well. That's just the way we do things. And I think that's a very hard thing to overcome. And a good example, we've been doing a lot of work, and this is a pretty narrow space, but in home improvement, and a large home improvement organization that's adopted automation at scale, and they're doing some phenomenal things. I mean, just amazing customer experience, amazing experiences for their installers. And I look at the opposite of that in the experience I'm going through as a consumer, where I've been sending emails to the concrete contractor that's supposed to start any day now for the last month. And it's always, next week. And there's just no experience whatsoever. And the reason why is probably that organization, the owner's probably been in business for a long time, and there's just too much, of their own thinking and stuff that gets in the way of their ability to change and move towards digitization, automation, better experience, et cetera.
Yeah.
If you want to see examples of doing it wrong or doing it right, all you have to do is look at the experience you may be having yourself with various delivery services during this time when we've all been ordering everything online, and you've had different carriers bringing things to you. And some say you'll have it Sunday, and it doesn't show up until the following Thursday. Whereas if they'd said it'll show up before Friday, and then starting 12 hours before delivery, there's a moving dot on a map to tell you where it is. Even if it got there a day later, you'd have felt it was a better experience because you weren't being kept in suspense. You were able to plan other things around that.
Yeah.
So instrumentation of the process, so that people have a clear picture of, is anything happening here? Look how you feel when you're on a PC and there's a difference between a little spinning beach ball or circling arrow, and you have no idea if anything's really happening, as opposed to a progress bar, or maybe even my favorite, a verbose display that says, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Please over-communicate to me.
The Domino's pizza tracker?
Verbose mode, show more detail, just so I can have a sense that, something is happening here.
Yes. Yes. I feel like we can all resonate with that experience.
I think it's a universally shared experience at this point.
Exactly. Yeah.
I feel like the most optimized version of this I've seen in the world is the Domino's pizza tracker. It's a phenomenal. If you've ever ordered from Domino's, it tells you the name of the person who processing your order, who just slapped pepperoni on top of your cheese, who put it in the oven, who boxed it up, who picked it up for delivery, estimated. I mean, you can go to that website and down to a minute know exactly how far away your pie is from your house. I think that's a really good example of how you make great
people just want visibility. They don't want to be disappointed. They don't want to be jerked around. They don't want a 4-hour window when something might or might not happen. They just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've actually talked about that Domino's pizza tracker just recently internally, because when you think about, healthcare delivery and the complexity or the alignment of several services, whether it's getting, pre-qualifications from an insurance organization in advance of a procedure or an appointment, I think you find that, patients often get very lost in the process. And I think that the only thing that they want at times is a little bit of transparency and understanding as to where they're at, who do I have to call? Where is this stuck? And I think you can see there's just a tremendous amount of complexity behind the scenes, but being able to, again, it's not as simple as a pizza when in the ovens, but I think that's the paradigm that organizations that, do healthcare delivery have to start to take in order to meet, the expectations of consumers, because, unfortunately, that's the expectation that's being set by organizations that deliver pizzas. But that's the paradigm, though, and that's important for others to understand.
Yeah.
Alexi wins the digital maturity bingo today by being the first to use the phrase peeling the onion, which is a really valuable metaphor, because in so many cases, it turns out people have a mental model based on, well, here's the form. If I let you see the form, you can see everything on the form, including things that you are not supposed to see in your role. So instead, you're going to have to ask me questions about the form, and then I'll only answer the questions you're supposed to see. That's what happens if you start with the paper-based model and you congratulate yourself on merely eliminating the paper, but you still have that monolithic character to the data.
Yeah.
Now, if instead you have a role-based access to a shared truth, where my allowed question should only be, is this above or below this critical threshold that allows me to pick an example? Can I give this customer this order on credit, or is this customer's account standing not good enough to give that on credit?
Yeah.
I don't need further credit rating. I just need red light, green light.
Yeah.
And if we do things in an API orientation instead of a digital forms orientation, then you will be able to have shared truth with appropriate visibility. You won't get in trouble with HIPAA or GDPR or any of the other perfectly reasonable and long overdue rules and frameworks around who should be able to see what. But you have to remind yourself, the purpose is to serve the asker of a question or the receiver of an experience, not to lovingly build a Jurassic Park in which all of your paddocks have your 65 million year old models, but now they're on screens instead of on pieces of paper.
Yeah, that's so good. So I have a couple questions for you guys. First, whether Peter or Tom, either one of you guys, how has your organization or organizations you guys have been exposed to adopted workflow automations, and how has your approach changed over the last 8 to 12 months?
I think what's interesting about Crowe is they were really a pioneer in the accounting firm space. And in 2016, they came out with this work from wherever, wear what you want, unlimited PTO policy. And if you know accounting firms, they're more suit and tie than they're, casual Friday was like a thing, as opposed to being casual every day, like people are more accustomed to now. So I think that process started very early for Crowe. And I think more recently it's evolved. And what I'm seeing is that there's a little bit more freedom happening in terms of automation and digitation. We know the words I'm aiming for. And that our teams are experimenting with different tools and different approaches. And I think that's a healthy thing to happen as you reach and you go beyond sort of the invested and you start heading towards maybe a current state of optimization. Is you have to keep the laboratory firing. You have to let people be creative and find solutions that work for them and see if they can, maybe incubate something that can be pushed up and out to the larger organization. So I think that's what we're seeing inside of our organization personally, is this sort of individual teams and divisions experimenting with things and maybe establishing best practices that can be exported to the rest of the company.
That's cool. Peter, any thoughts?
Well, I've lived through what one might call the 4 eras of Salesforce, collaboration, because I joined a company that had very traditional, folder-based email, where when you saved a message, you had to know why you would want to look for it the next time, because you were going to have to put it in one folder in a hierarchy, and that was a limitation. And when I wanted to file an expense report, I had to take my receipts, lovingly put them on 8.5 by 11 sheets, mail them in to be scanned at HQ. And that was
facts, everything.
That was pseudo digital, but clearly not completely digital. And then we moved to what we might call the next epoch, where now it was tag-based rather than folder-based email. And now you could pretty much find anything you needed, and that was great. But again, you had that problem that if you sent an email to someone and they didn't attend to it, the process had no knowledge of itself. And it was up to individual people to make sure that someone was being delegated to receive their emails when they were out. And those are brittle processes. They have a lot of failure modes. Well, then we moved to a model that was more of what I'll call entity-based communication. Now you have an object that represents an account, and any conversation about the account is visible to the people who need to see that account. And that's very powerful. But again, it's really just representational. It doesn't readily lend itself to any kind of automation. And now $28 billion of Slack acquisition and a year and a half of acculturation later, we are jumping through the hoops that we are urging our customers to learn to navigate and say, when you build a channel, it's discoverable. People can join the channel and participate. And when the need that the channel meets has gone away, you can archive it, but you can still always find it. You can find the playbook. Crucially, you can create a workflow attached to a channel so that the things that are the best practices for the communication are made the easy thing to do instead of being made the thing that you have to remind people to do. The third or fourth time that you say to someone, please reply in thread, you could just have a little lightning bolt so that the natural behavior of clicking the lightning bolt results in the reply going where it should. That's the right kind of automation. It doesn't create new burdens of learning and complexity. It makes the things you want people to do the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
And it creates fabrics of problem solving that bring in connections to the tools they need instead of processes of moving from tool to tool, like bees going from flower to flower and hoping you don't leave anything out.
Yeah.
And that's really where we feel we need to go. Crucially, a lot of people think that they learned things during pandemic, and now they're saying, great, now we know how to do this. What happens if you scratch the data just more than superficially? People who already knew each other, networks that were already in place, they got overclocked during pandemic, and people talked about meeting burnout and things like that. But it turns out that people new to the organization were being knitted into the networks much more slowly than before. So the aggregate number of messages looks unsustainable. Cutting back on the messaging traffic is not the solution because your new people weren't getting brought in well enough already. So we have to be very intentional. And the fact that we're talking about engineering the culture first, then empowering that culture with the technology instead of throwing the technology at the culture you've got, that's really important.
Yeah.
Wonderful tools thrown at broken processes and dysfunctional cultures do not produce wonderful results.
Yeah, man, that's good. Thank you, guys. All right. Ellipses, what challenges has your organization faced in adopting digital tools and workflows? Love to hear that from you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, we've learned over the last several years, we've been going through a lot of consumer digitization, I guess you can say, or consumer experience. And I think the one thing that you find is that there's a lot of solutions in out there in the marketplace, whether you're looking at, Salesforce or one-off solutions for other, to very specific, facets of the services, right, that you provide or trying to deliver. And I think one thing that we struggle with in the adoption of tools is how do you actually, bring them together to create a cohesive and uniform experience for your patients and your members and even your employees. Because again, if you go out and you look at a patient experience, let's say all the way from across that continuum from the point at which they're looking for services because they have a problem, or even that they're unsure if they have an issue. So symptom checking, all the way to scheduling, looking for a physician and scheduling an appointment, and then actually having a visit, whether it's in person or through telehealth, and then in between there, you're also dealing with the pre-appointment documentation, right? So what are you actually filling out on paper? And you think of the clipboard. So if you're doing it via telehealth, they're not mailing you a clipboard and a pen. And then you also think at the end, well, how do I understand what happened? What was the outcome of my visit? If you think just across that one little, that continuum right there for that one example, you could squeeze 10 different pieces of technology, an infinite number of spin-off workflows. And what happens is that, if you end up trying to produce that product or that solution and you provide it back to the patient, you end up with an incredibly disconnected experience. In a lot of ways, you probably end up digitizing your inefficiencies that lie beneath the waterline. So I think that's one of the areas where organizations, and I don't think that's unique to a healthcare delivery organization at all, but I think it's important when you look at this consumer experience and what you're trying to deliver, that you have to really look at not only the front of the house, right, what the patients and the members have access to, but also the back of the house. I believe I believe consumers are incredibly savvy, and they can sniff out, the digitization of maybe garbage that you had lying beneath the water line, and basically put it on a screen with a meter on it or something along those lines. So again, I think that's like overall, when you think of the tools and workflow and process, I think it's really important that you're thoughtful and think about the entire patient journey, the entire continuum, and the data behind it before you start on a siloed endeavor to digitize one component of a process.
Yeah, that's really insightful, Ellipses. Like, listening to you talk about that, it makes me wonder, like, if I was somebody that was looking at improving digitization at my organization, how do I would want to avoid the opportunity of where I am investing digitization in my inefficiencies. Like, how does somebody go about like avoiding that? How do you go about making sure that you're investing in the right places when it comes to your digitization at your organization? And that's open to all three of you guys.
I have an interesting example from healthcare specifically, and trying to solve for experience and how do you optimize that, not just digitally, but in general. And it's what we found was, if you asked the providers how many touch points a member had in coming in for a hospital visit or a doctor's visit, they would map out their process and they would say that the person had maybe 7, right? They check in and then they get called back, and then they, get their vitals taken and they get roomed, and then they have the physicians come in, et cetera, right? So they had about 7. Turns out there's about 17, because the experience really begins when they are as you were saying, calling in to schedule an appointment. But it also includes things like parking your car at the hospital and wayfinding and going to that front desk. And there's so many more touch points that we don't see in our own processes. And we had to uncover that in the healthcare space by doing shadowing, literally following patients through a hospital and timing their experience and looking at all the touch points and everyone that they interacted with. And when we fully understood what our customers went through, we were better able to understand, how do we make this a better experience? How do we improve everything from that first call? And we were shadowing the people who were answering the calls, and we were shadowing the people who were working the front desk. And we spent a lot of time just watching and listening to be able to identify what the experience really, where it really started, really ended, and all the touch points. And having that understanding gives us a solid foundation to start making investments and how we make it better.
Oh, that's good. So what I'm hearing is from you, Tom, it's like focus in on that customer journey. Ellipses, you said the same thing, like follow that customer, follow their experience, and really start to identify like how we can improve in that experience and that journey for them. Peter, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, the things that the things the guys have been saying are so spot on, because there are a couple of phenomena that are well understood. One is something called streetlight effect, which is the old story about walking down the street at night. You see someone searching in the pool of light under a street light, and you say, "Hey, buddy, what's the problem?" He says, "I dropped my keys." And you try to help him, and when you don't find them, you say, "Are you sure you dropped them here?" He says, "Well, no, I dropped them in that puddle up the street." "Why are we looking here?" "Well, the light's so much better here." And there's a Wikipedia page for streetlight effect, which is the tendency to look at the data that's available, precise, timely, cheap, hoping that if you look at it hard enough, the answer you want will be in there somewhere. But as we've just been discussing, as Tom's just been saying, there's no substitute for doing the walkthrough with the customer and encountering the things that the customer won't complain about, because they're like friction, rust, and gravity. They think, well, I'm not going to complain about those. Those are just unavoidable. I'm not going to complain about those. I'm going to complain that the form was poorly organized, because I know they can fix that. They're not going to complain about the things that they've either stopped noticing or that they don't believe you can fix. And Alexi was saying some similar things. There's a perception that investing in customer experience is only something you can afford to do in concierge, white glove, luxury markets. But if you think about what is the thing that people hate most about going to the doctor, it's showing up on time for your appointment and sitting there for 2 hours. Why do they overschedule? Because so many people cancel. Gee, is there a feedback opportunity here where I can get, when I make my appointment, they ask simple questions like, will you have reliable transportation that day? If you say you're not sure, they'll say, would you like us to contact you an hour before your appointment and book you an Uber on us if need be, because the cost of that Uber compared to the cost of an unused hour of time in a medical office is trivial. You can afford to get them there if it means that you don't have that hour go unbilled, right? And then when you are 15 minutes ahead of time, they can say, we don't have your paperwork on file, so we'd like to have you on time. Or alternatively, we have your current paperwork. If there's no change, we'd be happy to see you 20 minutes after your scheduled time. Again, this is a case of being really digital, knowing what you know. Paper-based systems don't know what they know. You have to go look in the drawer. A digital system where you've digitized the verbs and not just the nouns knows what it knows how much more it's going to need, minimizes manual re-entry of that data, and merely asks for confirmation rather than duplicate entry of data. That's where you have to get your head. Is I'm going to build a dynamic system here that minimizes the friction, rust, and gravity in all parts of the relationship. And Alessi, I think you used the phrase customers can smell when you've just been going through the form. Tom Davenport and Andrew Spagni wrote a piece in Sloan Management Review where they talked about $4.7 trillion of what people thought was digital transformation spending, of which 19% had translated into anything that customers perceived as an improvement in customer experience. So that's the other 80%, cost reduction, efficiency improvement, maybe even depapering processing. But the customers didn't feel that it had actually done anything for them. Amazing what people will do in terms of giving you information if they see value coming back to them, and they don't just feel that you're just harvesting the data to sell them more stuff. If you make it clear, you're going to offer them the kind of experience they thought they couldn't afford, because that's what luxury does. It starts by creating a new scarcity that no one ever had one of those before, and only a few people can have it. But then very quickly, technology eliminates scarcities by making them cost effective to deliver en masse, bespoke at scale, customization at scale. If it's not doing that, I don't think it's technology. It's something else.
Yeah, I think you hit it spot on. I think I laugh at the idea of investing millions of dollars in a digital consumer transformation, and then patients still wind up in a waiting room. And but and that's just one example of where you would find the similar type of not thinking through the outcomes, right, that you're trying to accomplish and who you're trying to serve with your work and your efforts.
Talk about creating differentiation. If I know that when I deal with this medical practice, I will never be kept waiting if I arrive at the time they told me they'd see me, you think that might create a degree of preference in the
preference. I think the larger thing driving healthcare, right, is that if you focus on experience, happy patients give you it's proven if you focus on patient experience, you'll achieve the triple aim. You will have better efficiencies, you will reduce waste, you'll have better outcomes, you'll get better HCAP scores, your reimbursement rates will go up. And so it seems, patient experience is really the key.
And don't let us be limited to healthcare here. We've worked with, for example, cities like Denver and Philadelphia on building 311 systems. 911 is what you call when you're hit by a car. 311 is what you call when your cat's up in a tree. Instead of you going through the classified pages of the directory trying to figure out which of 20 different city agencies you call 311, and they accept the burden of knowing which truck should roll. But that can be so much more. That can be, I see a pothole. Here's a photograph of the pothole. My phone is telling you where it is. You start doing optimized scheduling of road crews to fix the maximum number of potholes with the fewest number of truck rolls. And people start to feel like participants in this process instead of victims of its inefficiency.
Yeah.
That's really exciting when you don't merely move things from a phone call to a website or an email, but you create a dynamic, intelligent behavior that begins with digitization, but continues with something more.
Yeah.
I was laughing because I was thinking about Domino's was going out and filling potholes with people.
Yeah.
Remember? People would tweet pictures to Domino's of the pothole, and they would say, "Great, we'll be there." And they would go out and they would literally hire people to fill potholes so their pizzas would get there better.
And they put a Domino's logo on the patch. Yeah. And this is a great example too when you're talking about potholes, because it's really cool that a Tesla driving down the street has the machine vision to see a pothole and dodge around it. That's neat. Nice tech trick. I think it's much cooler that the next Tesla driving down the street doesn't need to see the pothole because it already knew about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Building systems that understand there's a reason for collecting data, and that's to give it to someone who needs it to change their behavior at a moment in time. The word data is interesting. I thought the word data would have an etymology that says something like, fact. It turns out the word data derives from a root meaning a thing given. You could argue, kind of epistemologically, that it's not data until I give it to someone and it helps them do something different than they would have done before. Then it becomes data.
Yeah.
The moment of datafication is when I give it to you and it gives you some value.
Yeah.
And if we think about it that way, then data becomes a force to change things instead of just a mass of record of what we've done before.
I like this. I feel like kind of my takeaways from this conversation is when it comes to really figuring out where to invest your digitization and do it effectively, it's like you're tapping into the needs and desires of the people that you're servicing, and then investing in that and understanding like what is it that their needs are. What do my employees need? What do my customers need? What are the pains that they're going through with where things are at today? And then becoming creative problem solvers and going, okay, what can we do then? What can we invest in to really make this a better experience for them? And so that we can really just create a wonderful, just overall digitization experience and implementation.
I'll offer a friendly amendment on that, though, which is it's not merely tapping into the desires they already know they have. Peter Sondergaard, when he was still at Gartner, said the old market research asks people, what do you want? And there's a quote attributed to Henry Ford, although it's probably he never actually said it, that if he had listened to his customers, he would have bred a faster horse.
Yeah.
Customers don't ask for what they don't realize can exist. And that's been one of the most, that's the reason, frankly, I'm still at Salesforce 15 years into what I thought would be an interesting 5-year gig.
Yeah.
Is that every 2 years, we're able to give people something they didn't know they could have.
Yeah.
They weren't asking for it because they didn't know they could have that. And so surfacing their need before it's become a desire by measuring what they seem to be trying to do and measuring the pain they seem to be suffering, even if they have gotten used to it and have gotten numb to it. That's what makes you want to get out of bed and go to work in the morning, is that I'm going to show you can have a world where you can fly.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's good. I received that amendment.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
We do have a question from someone in the audience that I wanted to ask you guys. Would you recommend use of experience portals, not only for customers, but also for internal services within a company such as HR and IT requests?
I think, speaking of automation, my lights turn off if I don't make any movements.
Wave your hands.
I just have to go like this.
I'll see you.
Yeah.
Pound on the desk, and then we get the lights back. I think you always have to be asking yourself, where are we making people do redundant tasks, and where are experience is lacking? Where can we improve operating processes? And if the answer to that is providing, employees or your customers a great portal that allows them to, take all of the data that's already been given to them and present it back, do not make them re-enter it, and to, offer helpful suggestions or give them an advanced starting point, allow them to achieve the thing that they need to achieve with the minimal number of clicks and screens between here and there. And maybe if it looks nice and it is easy to access along the way, that's really great too. Then I think portals are a great solution. I think if you just create a portal because you want to shift the burden of the work from you to some other audience, because hey, if we give them a portal, they can log in and type in all this stuff themselves, and you don't connect it as an experience, then you're just moving your problem to another space and calling it a portal. So I think portals are excellent. We build a ton of them. It's one of our favorite products to work with. But it has to be thoughtful, it has to be connected, and it has to take advantage of everything you know about the person who's logging in and serve it back to them in a meaningful way to be truly valuable.
Awesome.
It also creates an expectation and an obligation that information will be kept current. And if you budget to create it without also budgeting to maintain it, you're actually going to wind up with a net decrease in satisfaction. People say the portal's useless. You're going to have to get them on the phone to get current information. If you trust the portal, it's going to be, it's going to be out of date or it's going to be incomplete. You can build and then immediately destroy the brand of your portal by lack of attention to having the most useful information up front, phrased in ways that non-specialists can understand, and ruthlessly maintained to make sure it never misinforms people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that, and I think we operate a large organization, and we have a lot of requests that come in, and I think the use of a portal, I think you have to really look back at someone is in need of information, and the question is how are you actually able to get from what their need or demand is to actually providing that information back to them, or connecting them with the person or the content that they need. And so even though I think portals, like you said, are great aggregation points for content or a means of actually providing display back, I think a lot of our focus lately has been on how do you change the methodology from chat or voice recognition, and to basically avoid having to go through a portal for the purpose of it's a large repository where information is just hanging out, to actually connecting people to a need or a demand to the information or the service that they need to have provided to them. So I just think you have to think about what the value or the purpose of the portal is versus what the individuals are trying to accomplish, and make sure that you use it appropriately.
Yeah.
The natural behavior of these systems is accumulative. Every question that's ever been answered gets added to the quote knowledge base, unquote. And it winds up being something where if you know what to ask, you can find it, but it won't tell you what you should have asked. And most of the problems arise not because someone couldn't get the answer to the question they knew to ask, but because there are questions they didn't even realize they should ask. Need to be made more intelligent in that regard. Let me give you one of my favorite examples. When my kids were in second grade, my wife and I did some volunteer time in the classroom, and they were being still taught to read analog clock faces back then. I don't know if they teach second graders that anymore. That may be considered a legacy skill, but it was so clear grading those papers. There were kids who hadn't quite gotten the concept that one of the hands was longer than the other, while there are others who were weak on the distinction between left and right. And if all you measured was correct answers and ignoring the underlying reason for the error, you would just say, well, this one just doesn't get it, so we're going to keep showing him 20 or 30 more clock faces until he finally figures it out. Now, you got to drill down and say, what is the reason for the lack of understanding? What is the key point? And of course, with our Trailhead educational framework that's part of our offerings these days, it is micro-targeted knowledge that can be delivered. It can be served up by an algorithm that says, oh, okay, this is the third time that you've spent 20 minutes doing this. I'm going to offer you proactively a 5-minute lesson in how to automate that. And that's when the systems get really exciting, when they're noticing what you seem to find difficult and offering you the in the moment, in the context training that you'll say, oh, this serves a purpose for me. This is meeting a need for me, as opposed to most training, which is taking you away from the context where you have the problem to sit in a classroom being taught by people who know the tool but don't know your job. Yeah. There's a reason why training is something we make, satirical videos about. It can be done better if the system becomes more self-aware. And that's real. A lot of what Tom and Alexei have both been saying is the systems need to be more aware of the difficulties people are having and the needs they're trying to meet, instead of just thinking that doing what the system does better, faster, cheaper is success, because it's not.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. This was so wonderful just talking to you and learning from you guys. Just really have enjoyed our time together. Thank you again for your time. And everyone here that has joined us, thank you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please check your inbox for the 2022 State of Digital Maturity Advancing Workflow Automation Report. The findings we shared in our presentation only scratch the surface of what's inside of it, so be sure to check it out For more data from our survey and advice from automation experts on what to do to prioritize in your digitization efforts. A recording of this session will also be circulated in the next few days. In the meantime, please feel free to join us on any of our social media channels to tell us how you're using digital tools to achieve true efficiency at your org. Thank you again to our panelists. You guys, again, wonderful to talk with you guys. Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you all.